The woman in black. I had been a trucker most of my life, and I never thought I'd end up telling this story out loud. My wife always said I wasn't the type to scare easy, and she was right. After years behind the wheel, I had learned to ignore strange noises, shadows on the road, and the odd character hanging around truck stops. But that night was different. That night was the first and last time she ever heard fear in my voice. It was about 20 years ago, back when cell phones weren't much use out on the highway. Reception was patchy, batteries drained fast, and in some stretches of desert you could forget about having a signal at all. That's why truckers like me still relied on payphones to call home. I was 2 days into a 4-day run across the desert highways. I'd driven this route plenty of times, and everything had gone smoothly up to that point. The sun had long since disappeared behind the mountains, and the only light came from my headlights and the faint glow of distant stars. That second night, I pulled into a lonely gas station outside a nameless little town. The neon sign flickered like it might give out any second, and the whole place smelled of gasoline and cold asphalt. I walked over to the payphone, dropped a couple of coins in, and dialed my wife's number. The second she answered, I realized I couldn't hide the tremor in my voice. "There's this woman," I told her. "I've seen her twice now. She doesn't say anything. Just watches me." The first time had been earlier that day at another stop, just a glimpse of someone standing by the ice machine. Dressed head to toe in black, face lost in shadow. I brushed it off. But then, hours later, at another station miles away, there she was again. Same black dress. Same stillness. Same cold dread sliding down my spine. My wife tried to calm me down. "Honey, you're tired. Maybe she's just another traveler on the same route. Don't think too much about it." But she didn't understand. Wherever I stopped, she was already there. Always distant, always silent. I never saw her arrive. I never saw her leave. She was just there. I told my wife I had a bad feeling, that something terrible was waiting for me on this road. She promised to pray for me, told me to rest when I could. I tried to believe her words, but deep down I knew the truth. I was being followed. And not by anything human. When I hung up, I glanced across the lot. For just a second, I saw the hem of a black dress swaying gently, though the air was perfectly still. My blood went cold. I hurried back to my truck, slammed the door, and pulled out onto the highway, headlights slicing through the endless dark. The desert at night can play tricks on you. The horizon stretches forever, but the cab feels like it's shrinking around you. The hum of the tires becomes a heartbeat in your ears. And the mirrors can betray you. Every time I checked them, I thought I saw her. A flicker of black just outside the edge of my lights. A figure standing where no one should be. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles bone white. The silence pressed against the glass, heavy as if the night itself wanted inside. Then came the curve. I knew it well, had taken it countless times. But this time, something felt wrong. My chest tightened. My hands trembled. Cold sweat stung my eyes. And then, it happened. Tires screeched. The steering wheel jerked. Metal screamed as the truck skidded across the asphalt and slammed into the guardrail. Glass shattered. My head hit hard, and then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was still alive. Dazed, bleeding, but alive. The cab was mangled around me, the smell of gasoline and burnt rubber filling my lungs. My whole body shook as I forced myself out through the broken door and collapsed onto the gravel. For a moment I lay there under the cold desert sky, listening to the ringing in my ears. Then I saw movement. Out by the edge of the road, just past the reach of my headlights, stood a figure. A woman, dressed in black. Silent. Motionless. Watching me. I blinked, and she was gone. The police arrived not long after. They said I was lucky to survive. They chalked it up to fatigue, maybe a moment of distraction. I nodded, but deep down I knew what I'd seen. Even now, 2 decades later, I can still picture her standing there in the dark, waiting. And every time I drive at night, I wonder if she's still out there, watching the road, waiting for the next driver to follow. If you ever feel eyes on you at a lonely gas stop, or see the outline of a black dress swaying in the dark, don't stare. Don't give her time to get closer. Because once she finds you, you'll never drive the highway the same way again. But stay with me, because the next story isn't about a woman in black. It's about a familiar face on the side of the road, a friend who shouldn't have been there at all. The ghostly hitchhiker friend. I've been on the road for more than a decade, and if there's one thing long nights behind the wheel teach you, it's how to separate what's real from what your mind invents to keep you awake. Headlights can turn a fence post into a person. Heat shimmer can look like smoke. But there are some things I can't file under tricks of the eye, and one of them happened on a 2-lane stretch of highway where the desert swallows sound. It was just past midnight when I rolled into a tired little gas station on the edge of a town that didn't bother with a welcome sign. Half the bulbs in the neon were dead, the other half buzzed like angry insects. I topped off my tank, grabbed coffee that tasted like hot pennies, and that's when I noticed him, leaning against the cinderblock wall near the vending machines, head bowed, hands stuffed into his pockets like he was trying to keep from shaking. Even before he looked up, something in my chest tightened. And then he lifted his face, and the years peeled away. "Mateo?" I said, not believing my own voice. We'd grown up on the same block. We'd shared bikes, summer jobs, stupid fights, and easy forgiveness. To me, he wasn't just a friend. He was family that didn't share my last name. Life split us after high school. I chased miles and paychecks, he stayed close to home. But I never stopped thinking we'd sit down one day and laugh about the time we almost burned down Mr. Ortiz's shed. He didn't answer. His eyes were dark, rimmed with a sleepless gray. There was a flatness to him I couldn't place, like he'd been scraped thin. Up close, the cold seemed to cling to his clothes. The night wasn't that chilly, but standing near him felt like stepping into shade at noon. "You need a lift?" I asked, trying for light. "I'm heading east. I can get you closer, at least." He gave the smallest nod. No smile, no "hey man, long time." Just that nod. I opened the passenger door. He climbed in carefully, like every movement had to be remembered before it was made. He didn't buckle up. He didn't ask where we were going. He just stared through the windshield as if the glass were a horizon. We pulled back onto the highway. The town fell away in the mirrors, and the dark took its place. For a while, it felt almost normal, like any overdue reunion you don't know how to start. I tried anyway. I asked about his mom. I asked if he'd ever fixed up that old Chevy. I reminded him of the time we jumped from the railroad bridge into the river, and he lost a shoe but swore it was the river's fault. Stupid, easy memories meant to thaw whatever was frozen between us. He said nothing. The heater hummed. The coffee went from bitter to cold. My hands cramped on the wheel. Mile markers ticked by like teeth. The longer the silence stretched, the more I noticed the wrongness. The way he breathed, shallow and slow. The way he held his hands flat on his thighs like he was afraid to curl his fingers. The way he didn't glance at me once, not even when I laughed at my own bad joke just to fill the cab. "Everything okay, man?" I asked quietly. "You want me to pull over?" His head didn't turn. But his right hand rose, lifted, hovered, and then made a small motion. A gesture you make when you're trying to be polite and not cause trouble. The kind of motion you'd use to wave off a stranger's kindness, or to say "this is fine, this is far enough." "You want out?" I said. "Here?" He gave that same tiny nod. We were miles from anything, but there was a wide gravel pull-off meant for slow vehicles to cool their brakes. I eased the rig onto it, hazards ticking like a second heartbeat. I reached across and pushed the door handle up for him, out of habit more than sense. He slid out of the cab, careful as he'd climbed in, and stood for a second on the shoulder with his back to the road, as if he were listening to something below the ground. "You sure?" I called through the open window. I can take you to the next town. It's 20 minutes, half an hour tops. He didn't turn. He lifted his hand in that same small gesture, thanks, no more, and started walking along the gravel edge, keeping to the white line like it was a rail. I watched him in the side mirror until the hazard lights washed him in orange, and then lost him in the dark. I waited longer than I needed to, telling myself I was just letting my hands stop shaking. The coffee had a skin on it by then. A cold draft still threaded the cab. Finally, I clicked off the hazards, rolled back onto the highway, and drove. The road was emptier than usual, a black ribbon sewn through scrub and rock. I passed a jackrabbit frozen in the beams, a plastic bag tangled in a mile marker, the carcass of a tire like a discarded black belt. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting to see Mateo's silhouette appear in the wash of my taillights, but the night gave me nothing back. I made it to the next truck stop, a bigger place with clean bathrooms and fluorescent light that made everything look like it had already been bleached. I parked under a lamp, locked the cab out of reflex, and stood there letting the noise of the place wash the silence out of my ears. Inside, I filled a new cup with coffee I wasn't going to drink, then stared at my phone like it might tell me what to do. I didn't have Mateo's number anymore. But I had one number that hadn't changed since high school. "Mariana?" I said when the call connected. "It's me. I picked up, I think I saw your brother." On the other end, there was a pause that stretched too long. Then she said my name the way people do when they're bracing for something heavy. "Where?" she asked. Her voice was thin and very far away. "On Route 50, I said. "Outside of—" I looked for a map, looked for anything to anchor me. "He was by the gas station near mile marker 212. I gave him a ride. He didn't talk. He asked to get out a few miles later." Another long pause. The hum of the refrigerators filled the space where her breath should have been. When she spoke, her voice was careful, stacked on careful. "You're sure it was Mateo?" "I'd know him anywhere," I said. "He looked tired. Not good. But it was him." She took a breath that sounded like a hitch in tape. "Listen to me. Don't hang up." A rustle, muffled voices behind her, a door closing. "The police were here earlier," she said finally. "There was an accident this evening. They brought his wallet. They said he died near the quarry. He didn't make it." Something cold slipped behind my ribs and stayed there. The fluorescent lights in the truck stop hummed louder. Somewhere a microwave beeped like a backing alarm. I pressed my thumb so hard into the paper cup I could feel the heat bite my skin. "That's not—" I started, and the word fell apart. "Mariana, I just gave him a ride." He got out. He walked away. On the line, only breathing. It stretched until it didn't sound human anymore, just the sound a phone makes when the person holding it has run out of words. "I'm sorry," she said at last, and the sorry wasn't for me. "I'm so sorry." We didn't say goodbye. We just let the call end the only way calls like that do, with a click that felt too small for what it carried. I stood there a long time with a coffee I couldn't drink and a story I couldn't tell anyone at the counter without seeing their face fold into polite disbelief. I went back to the truck because there was nothing else to do. I checked the passenger seat as if proof might have pooled there like spilled light. The seat was empty. The heater finally caught up to the cold. I slept in the cab that night with the dome light on like a kid. When I did drift off, I dreamed about the way Mateo had lifted his hand, small, apologetic, like he didn't want to make a mess of anything anymore. I woke to my own breath fogging the glass and the faintest shape moving in the corner of the windshield that turned out to be nothing but the lamp post swaying. In the morning, I drove back the way I'd come. There were tire tracks in the gravel pull-off, mine and someone else's older, laid like scars. On the shoulder, I saw footprints that could have been anyone's, or could have been his, stamped into dust and distorted by the wind. I followed them a few paces until the sun burned off the trace and the shoulder became just shoulder again. People will tell you a lot of things to fix a story like this. Stress. Fatigue. grief hitting you sideways for someone you hadn't seen in years. They'll say I picked up a stranger who happened to look like the boy I grew up with, and my mind did the rest. I've said those things to myself, too. Over and over. They never feel like they fit. What I know is simple. I saw him. I gave him a ride. He asked to get out. I watched him walk away. And at the next stop, his sister told me he died hours before I ever pulled into that gas station. Since that night, I don't stop for familiar faces. I don't trust mirrors after midnight. Sometimes I catch myself raising my hand, small, apologetic, when I pass mile marker 212, like I'm answering a gesture only I can see. If you ever spot someone you used to know on the shoulder in the wash of your headlights, be sure your heart isn't doing the seeing for you. Because some rides don't take people home. They only remind the living how thin the glass is between the world we drive and the world that walks beside it. But stay with me, because the next story isn't about who sits beside you. It's about what rides behind you. A sealed trailer, a rush job, and one rule written in black marker across the bill of lading: do not open. And when the knocking starts from the other side of those doors, you'll wish you'd never taken the load at all. Don't open the trailer. You run enough loads and sooner or later someone offers you easy money with a hard rule. Mine came on a Tuesday night in a warehouse that smelled like wet cardboard. The dispatcher I barely knew slid a clipboard across a metal desk and said, "Double rate, cash on arrival. One condition." The bill of lading had it scrawled in marker across the top, each letter dug into the paper like a threat: do not open. I've hauled all kinds of strange arcade machines with glass that hummed in the heat, pallets of mannequin parts that looked too human when the straps loosened, even an old carnival ride with faces flaking off the paint. You see something odd, you strap it down and keep moving. That's the job. Still, I ask the question you're supposed to ask. What is it? Fragile, the guy said, not smiling. Time sensitive. You deliver to the address on page 2 before sunrise. You don't look. You don't stop longer than you have to. I knew I should walk. My rent didn't. I signed. The loadout was strange from the start. 2 men in matching jackets brought the crate to the dock on a pallet jack, heads turned, like they'd been told not to look at me or the world around them. The crate was tall and narrow, wrapped in black shrink, corners reinforced in a way that made me think of a person standing very still. They slid it in, I chained it down, crossed my straps. When I shut the doors, I felt a small breath of cold air escape the trailer, and didn't mention it. It was a mountain run, 2-lane blacktop, switchbacks, long stretches where the road fell off into darkness. The cold climbed the cab as I climbed the grade, heater doing its best. I told myself it was just elevation and metal. 10 miles in, something shifted. Not much. Just enough for the chain to ping once and settle. I checked my mirrors, told myself it's normal, told myself friction does what friction does when the road starts to lean. Then the sound came again. Not the ping. A tap. Like a knuckle on hollow wood. Patient, testing. I turned up the radio. Old rock filled the cab like insulation. Another tap found its way through the guitars. Road noise, I said out loud, because saying it makes it truer. There are places in the Appalachians where trees crowd the road and the night grows thicker between them. I passed a pull-off and kept going, then passed another. The taps grouped into threes. Then went quiet. Then returned as a single knock that felt like it knew where my ears were. The paperwork had a phone number for emergencies. I dialed and got a recording. Stay en route. Do not open the trailer. Do not stop unless required by law. The line went dead after that, like it didn't want to take responsibility for anything that could talk back. At the next rise the rig labored, engine deep and honest in the way machines are when they give you everything they have. The trailer seemed heavier than its weight, like the hill had grown teeth. I feathered the throttle and kept my eyes on the centerline. The road curved and my headlights cut across trunks that looked like ribs. I told myself to pull into the next truck stop, check my chains, document the condition, call it due diligence. The next thing that wasn't just a turnout came 20 minutes later, a small station with 2 pumps and a buzzing soda sign in the window. I rolled in, nose toward the road, trailer squared not to block anyone who might appear out of the dark. Inside, a man with a face like old bark rang up my coffee. "You running that gray tonight?" he asked, nodding toward the black behind me. "Trying to," I said. "Weather changes up there without asking permission," he said. "You hear things you think are the truck. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they ain't. Either way, keep it moving." I stepped back out, and the world folded around me. The station lights through a small island. Past the pumps, the night was a wall. From behind the trailer doors, one soft scrape, like something shifted its weight to the other foot. I told myself it was the chains stretching in the cold. Metal complains. The colder it gets, the more it complains. I set my coffee on the catwalk, rested my palm on the latch, and felt the warning run through me like a current. "Do not open." I pictured my signature on the paper like a nail in a board. I pictured the rent due. I pictured the old man's eyes when he said keep it moving. Back in the cab, the coffee tasted like secrets. I pulled out, the station's island of light shrinking in the mirrors until it was only the memory of a place. The road climbed and fell, climbed and held. The knocks turned into a slow shudder, traveled down the frame, and settled somewhere behind my spine. When I breathed, fog drifted from my mouth even with the heater on high. Halfway up a switchback, the dash lights flickered. For a heartbeat, everything went dark. The world, the cab, the part of me that believed in anything more complicated than stopping and starting. The engine caught itself. The lights came back. In the mirror, I thought I saw movement in the seam of the doors. It could have been frost. I talked to the truck like a skittish horse. "We're good. 1 hill, 2 hills, 3. We're good." My hands didn't believe me. I felt each tendon in my fingers as if they were strings tightening. The drop-off on my right was a mouth. If I had let any sound in except the engine, I think I would have heard it breathe. But the only sound I gave myself permission to hear was the next turn, the next gear, the next chance to keep my promise to a piece of paper. The address came up just before dawn, a long drive cut into the side of the mountain, a chain-link gate that opened without anyone coming to open it. The building at the end was concrete and no windows. One loading bay. One light on over the door. I backed in, bumpers against the dock, killed the engine, and listened to the world end in small noises. The bay door rolled up from inside. 2 men in jackets like the first 2 waved without looking at me and set the dock plate. I signed the tablet they held out, my name suddenly too large for the line. No one asked me how the drive was. No one asked if I wanted water. They just opened the trailer and stood there, heads tilted the way you look at a painting you're not sure you understand. "Everything secure?" one said. "Far as I know," I said. "Didn't open it." He looked relieved in a way that made me understand relief isn't always about safety. "Good," he said. "You got your cash." On the way out, I let the truck idle and watched my breath fog the glass. The mountain air tasted like pennies and pine sap. No one waved goodbye. The gate shut behind me with the soft click of a mouth closing. I didn't sleep when I got home. The apartment had that too quiet sound places get when they've been empty too long. I turned on a light. I turned on the TV with the volume down. I made coffee I didn't drink. Every time a pipe ticked or a neighbor's door closed, I felt it in the bones of the building like an echo of the road. That night, the sounds came back. Not loud. Not even insistent. Just familiar. 3 careful taps from somewhere I couldn't locate. Then a pause long enough to convince myself I'd imagined them. Then one more, soft enough to be a question. I told myself it was the radiator. I told myself it was my upstairs neighbor, a broom handle, a chair leg, the common language of old buildings talking to themselves. I didn't get up to check. I sat there with my hands on my knees, breathing shallow and slow, the way he had, whoever he was. The heater kicked on and the apartment exhaled with it. I stared at the door and imagined a thick black marker bleeding through paper. Do not open. People like a moral at the end of a story, especially a story that gnaws. They want me to say I'll never take a job like that again. Maybe I won't. Maybe I will when the math demands it. What I can say is this: sometimes the rule on the page is the only thing keeping the shape of the world steady. Sometimes you keep a promise not because you're scared of losing your money, but because you're scared of finding out there was never any money that mattered. When I roll past that station now, the one with the crooked neon, I don't stop. I check my mirrors. If the glass shows me nothing but road and my own tired face, I count that as mercy. If the heater can keep the cold where it belongs, I count that as grace. And if I ever hear that careful knock again, 3 then 1, I'll let the sound pass through me the way wind passes through chain link. I'll keep the lines straight and the doors shut. Some things you haul. Some things haul you. But stay with me, because the next story isn't about forbidden cargo. It's about a place you only stop when you're desperate, a gas station that shouldn't be there anymore. The lights were on, the doors said open, the shelves were stocked, and 10 years earlier, the whole place had been boarded up for good. The abandoned gas station. I'd been driving long enough to know every trick fatigue plays on you. Empty fields turn into oceans, shadows bend themselves into people, and the road feels like it's looping when it's not. But that night, I came across something I still can't explain. It was close to 3 a.m. I'd been running on caffeine and stubbornness, trying to stretch a delivery through a dead stretch of desert highway. Fuel was lower than I liked, and my eyes were burning from hours of staring at blacktop. When the glow of a gas station appeared ahead, I felt relief wash over me like cool water. The sign was old, paint flaking, but the lights were on. Neon buzzed weakly in the window, open. I didn't remember ever seeing a station here, though I'd run this route more times than I could count. Still, exhaustion makes you miss details. I pulled in. The pumps looked like relics from another decade, faded numbers under cracked plastic, metal worn almost white. But they hummed alive when I lifted the nozzle. I filled the tank, telling myself I'd grab a coffee and maybe a sandwich. The place was quiet, too quiet, but at that hour, quiet is normal. Inside, the air smelled of old linoleum and dust, like a house that hasn't been lived in for years. Shelves were stocked, cans of soup, motor oil, candy bars with logos I hadn't seen since I was a kid. The coolers buzzed, filled with sodas and glass bottles. Behind the counter sat a man in a faded uniform shirt. His name tag was smudged, unreadable. He looked up when I came in, but his eyes didn't seem to focus on me. His smile was stiff, like someone remembering how to perform the gesture. "Evening," I muttered, grabbing a coffee from a pot that looked like it had been brewing since the 80s. "Long road?" he said softly. His voice carried like it had traveled a long way to reach me. I nodded, poured the coffee, set a few crumpled bills on the counter. He didn't touch them, just kept smiling. Back outside, I took a sip. The coffee was ice cold. Not lukewarm. Not stale. Cold. My stomach dropped. I set the cup on the roof of the cab and looked around. The station was too still. The desert should have been noisy with insects, a breeze, something. But there was nothing, like sound itself had been cut out of the night. I climbed back into the truck and started the engine. My headlights lit the cracked lot, the neon still buzzing open. But in the rearview mirror, just for a second, the reflection showed the building boarded up, windows black, roof sagging, the way abandoned stations look after decades of sun and neglect. I twisted around to look directly. The lights were back on. Shelves full. Open. I didn't wait to think it through. I dropped the truck into gear and pulled out hard enough to scatter gravel. In the mirror, the glow of the neon shrank until it was gone. At the next real truck stop, bright, modern, alive with chatter, I parked and went straight inside. I must have looked pale because the cashier asked if I was okay. I told him about the station down the road, the one with the old pumps and the man at the counter. His face changed. That place? He said. Son, that station burned down 10 years ago. Whole family inside. Ain't been opened since. My hands went cold. I didn't argue. I didn't ask more. I just sat with a coffee that was hot this time and tried not to imagine the stiff smile of the man at the counter, the shelves stocked with brands that had no business still existing, the cup of coffee that had never been warm. Now, whenever I run that stretch, I make sure I top off the tank before I hit it. Because if I see those lights again, glowing in the middle of nowhere, I don't know if I'll have the strength to stop, or the strength not to. But stay with me, because the next story isn't about a building that refuses to stay dead. It's about something older, something that runs alongside your wheels when the night is at its darkest. A shadow with teeth, eyes that shine without headlights, and paws that never leave prints. They call it the black dog, and every trucker knows, if you see it, you're already in danger. The black dog. They say every trucker has a breaking point. Long hours, empty highways, endless dark, it gets inside your head. Some guys hear voices. Some see things that aren't there. And some see the black dog. The first time I heard the legend, I was just starting out. An old-timer at a truck stop in Oklahoma leaned across his coffee and said, "If you ever see a big black hound running alongside your rig, don't blink. Don't pull over. Don't even pray. Just keep the pedal down, because it means death is close." I laughed then. Chalked it up to trucker folklore, like haunted rest areas and phantom hitchhikers. But years later, on a stormy night in West Virginia, I stopped laughing. The rain came down in sheets, wipers squealing useless against the flood. My headlights cut tunnels through the water, and thunder rolled so close it rattled the mirrors. I had hours left on the clock and a deadline I couldn't afford to miss. So I pressed on, knuckles white on the wheel. It was in one of those blind curves, where the trees press tight and the fog settles low, that I saw it. At first I thought it was just a shadow thrown by lightning. But then it moved, fast, fluid, running right alongside the cab. A dog. Huge, bigger than any hound I'd ever seen. Its coat was midnight black, darker than the road itself. And its eyes, God help me, its eyes glowed pale green, catching the light even when the lightning had faded. It didn't bark. It didn't growl. It just ran, keeping pace with 40 tons of steel like it was nothing. Every muscle in my body screamed to look away, but I couldn't. The longer it stayed with me, the heavier the air in the cab felt. Like breathing mud. The smell of wet earth filled my nose, and the glass fogged though the heater was fine. My gauges flickered, speed, fuel, oil, all trembling like nervous hands. I pressed the accelerator, engine roaring, but the dog didn't fall back. If anything, it moved closer. Close enough that I swore I saw water dripping from its jaws, each drop vanishing before it touched the pavement. I gritted my teeth, muttered every prayer I half remembered, and kept my eyes on the white line. For a moment I thought I'd lost it, until the cab jolted hard, like something had slammed against the trailer. My heart stopped. In the mirror, I saw nothing but storm. No headlights behind me. No shapes in the trees. And then, in the next flash of lightning, it was there again, this time on the shoulder ahead, waiting. I hit the brakes so hard the trailer fishtailed, tires screaming. By the time I stopped, the road was empty. Just fog, rain, and silence thick enough to drown in. When I finally limped into the next truck stop, soaked in sweat, I asked around. Most drivers shook their heads. A few laughed. But one man, old and thin, eyes cloudy like smoke, just said, "You saw him, didn't you? The black dog. Count yourself lucky, son. He runs with those whose time is short. Some he only warns. Some he takes." I wanted to argue, but my voice caught in my throat. Because I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't escaped. Not really. That something had just postponed its claim. Even now, years later, every time my headlights catch movement on the roadside, my stomach knots. Every time I hear claws on asphalt in my dreams, I wake choking on the smell of wet earth. Believe what you want, but I'll tell you this: if you ever see that dog pacing your wheels, don't look too long into its eyes. Because the road doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to whatever's running beside you. That was the last story for tonight. 5 long hauls where the road gave back more than just miles. But remember this: sometimes the woman watching from the shadows is closer than you think. Sometimes the friend in your passenger seat was never really there. Sometimes the cargo isn't yours to open. Sometimes the station glowing in the dark was shuttered years ago. And sometimes the only thing running beside you isn't alive at all. The road isn't always freedom. Sometimes it's the trap that finds you when you're most alone. So tell me, if it happened to you, would you stop, or keep driving? Let me know in the comments. This was Tell Me What Happened. I'll see you in the next story.